Um, so thanks a lot for your applause, but they're not directed to me. They're directed at Thierry, F6EUK, who is still on his way back home. One of the conditions that his wife let him go to Crozet was to have some holidays on Reunion Island on his way back. So he should arrive on Reunion tomorrow, supposedly tomorrow. But altogether, he will have been away 5 months. And in relation to me, I guess I must thank him for giving me the opportunity to use my 50-second call sign in using MM0EXV. Again, everything that I will say will be on his behalf. He did the expedition. I wish I could have joined him, but obviously that was not possible. Anyway, this is the very first presentation done, even though I would say the expedition is not really finished. So there may be some things that are not perfect. Please excuse them, excuse my English, and I'll do the best I can to let you have a good feeling of what being on Crozet for 3 months sounds like. Crozet, I guess I can start the video. There is a website, probably most of you have visited it already. You can access it by just typing crozet2022.fr, because otherwise this is quite a complicated address, but that will take you there directly. So first of all, I'm sure all of you know where Crozet is located, but let's have a look. Then we'll have some explanations on how the application was made, all the negotiations involved, what kind of equipment Thierry has been using, the team that was around him, then about the trip, and then about the radio operation itself. So where is Crozet? This is a sign pole on Crozet, giving some of the small places from people that have been on the island, so they didn't get lost. So Crozet is basically and roughly between Madagascar and Antarctica. It is administered by the TAAF. I may refer to it later in the presentation as the TAF. The translation would be the French Antarctic and Subantarctic Territories. This is an administration that recently, well, a few years ago, took over the administration of Crozet, Kerguelen, St. Paul and Amsterdam, Juan de Nova, Glorioso, and Tromelin. So all this is under the TAF administration now. So the distance is, as you see, 2,800 kilometers from Reunion, where the Marion Dufresne, the boat, started the voyage. Crozet is an archipelago. There's several islands. Some of them have not been visited by any human for many, many years, like Île aux Cochons, which is the pork island, or the pig's island, has not seen any human in about 35 years. The base where Thierry operated from is on the Possession Island. That's where it is, and he could see the East Island, as it is called. So that's the Possession Island map. That's where the base is located, and obviously Thierry was there. There were 34 people on the team working on the island. Thierry was the only tourist accepted there, but he was still part of the team in a way that he had to participate in all the duties of the team, like, for example, cleaning the dining room. So sometimes, instead of operating, he had to do these kinds of things. So many penguins on the island. So the idea came up when one evening we were sitting together, and Thierry wanted to go someplace, and we had been friends since 1977 when we both went together to St. Bartholomew, which then was not a separate entity. It would still count as St. Martin. But anyway, that's when we met together. And so we said, well, why don't you go to St. Bartholomew again? Though he had been there several times in between. But after examining some possibilities, we came up with the idea of Crozet, because it was very rare, and Thierry wanted some good pileups, which he did get. So we started working on gathering as much information as we could on the TAF website with a lot of information, many pictures. A mail was sent to Fox 5 Uniform Fox X-Ray, who had organized several trips to Glorioso, to Tromelin, so he knew the way the TAF operate in terms of both visiting and licensing and all the rest of it. We find out some information on F6EXV's website with all the QSL cards from the previous operations from Crozet. Jerry F2VX, my best friend, I would say, on the radio, who wrote a REF history, including the one about the TAF. And Radio Ref had many articles since 60 years ago. The first activity from Crozet was 60 years ago. So that was one of the elements that was included in the application to celebrate the 60th anniversary. And while I'm talking about that, FT8WW, the call sign, has nothing to do with the Fox Tango 8 mode, but it was the newer call sign in reference to Fox Bravo 8 Whiskey, which was the call sign of the original operations. We also had contact with Gildas, who has been on Crozet on a few occasions. He's held several call signs. The TAF for quite some time, because the TAF issues the licenses, not the ANFR. They have their own administration. So for many years, Gildas, who travels on a fishing boat in the area, applied for call sign in case he needed to land. And the TAF would issue him a new call sign every year, even though he would not use it. New year, it would be a new call sign. But Thierry explained that, and now I think they will change the policy because obviously it's not necessary. After gathering all that information, the first basic ideas were that the best antennas would be a 4-square. The chance of getting permission would be only if that was only one operator, not a group. Several groups had applied for permission, and they were all denied. Crozet was number 3 on the most wanted list, but number 1 on the West Coast. So that was another reason that Crozet had some interest as a destination for Thierry's activity. His priority was to give Atnos to as many as possible. Obviously, that meant that originally he would not be active on many bands. And you may remember that when he started, he was basically on 30, and not too much though, but 20 and 17 before using the other bands. And among the conditions, he had to use what we call the MARDUF, or Marduf in French, which is the short for Marion Dufresne, which is the name of the boat that supplies all these islands every 3 months. So that meant he had to stay 3 months on the island. He couldn't go for less. Also, the original plan was to be on SSB during daytime and to be on CW during nighttime because of propagation on those bands that were chosen for the activity. And for the West Coast, when there was propagation, FT8 would be preferred simply because with the antennas that he was eventually going to have, that would be the most successful mode. We also had contacts with F6EXV Lima Kilo, who had worked for the administration. I won't go into many details, not because they're secret, it'll be too long a story. And he knew how to write to the administration. So his counsels were more than welcome. And he had info about the first operations, or first mission, more than operation, in 1961, 1962. So he helped in writing the application, and we got the support of the RAF, because the application was made on behalf of the RAF, which obviously gave it a little bit more weight than just an individual asking for permission. And the original application was sent to the TAF in March 2021. The administration is slow, as a surprise. So we had to wait, and in order to try and accelerate things, we had contact directly with the Minister of the Interior, who is the head of the TAF administration. How is that? Because the Minister of the Interior in France, at the present time, is also a mayor of a city, and his secretary is a friend of Thierry's wife. Are you following me? But so he was given a copy of the application. He liked it, luckily, and wrote to the TAF administration saying, "Please welcome this request." That helps. That helps. I'm not saying that Thierry would not have gotten permission without that, but that helped. And we had to wait because the chief of the highest authority of the TAF was visiting France for an extended period of time, so we had to wait until he came back in June 2021 to approach him directly. So that's when some application was submitted to the TAF. Thierry was able to talk to the boss of the base, because there is a telephone there. I'll talk about internet later, but there is a very good internet connection. But he talked on the telephone to try initial talks about explaining what he was going to do, what he wanted to do, and all the surroundings of what the DX operation is. So that's when, after talking to the base boss, he gave up the idea of using a Foursquare, not only because of the boss indication, because of nature protection as well. They wanted to limit his antennas to the minimum required so that he could be heard. So nature protection thought that there are many birds with suicidal ideas that wanted to, bump into the antennas to commit suicide. Well, we explained that previously there were towers and antennas that they used before internet times, and they never found a dead bird next to the towers. So we tried to explain this reasoning was stupid. We couldn't use the word stupid. That was the idea. But anyway, they maintained their position that no big antennas, only one little pole, nothing else. Of course, no beams. And one of the main points also was winds. On several occasions, he had winds of about 140 kilometers per hour. So that is heavy. When it rains under these winds, it rains horizontally. So Obviously, that was one thing important in terms of thinking of what kind of antennas to put. Also, some sensibilization to soil nature. Thierry could not just walk on his own anywhere he wanted to. He was supposed to be accompanied all the time by somebody about nature protection, saying, you can step here, but not here. Difficult. Safety. When there were strong winds, the regulations on the island say you cannot go outside just one person. You've always got to be two people together. So sometimes the wind was blowing strong. He had to go and see something going wrong on the antenna, but he just couldn't because nobody else was available. He had to obey the rules because he didn't want to endanger future operation. So the decision was made on the antenna choice to use either a vertical dipole, depending on the bands, either a vertical dipole or a G5RV antenna. Among the reasons to apply for the landing permission was also the 250th anniversary of the discovery of the island. And I don't know if it is mentioned elsewhere right after that. I think it is. Another aspect of the request were skids on QO100 with schoolboys and girls because the TAF wanted to have themselves known by the school communities. So that was one of the aspects of the request. And probably that was quite important, despite the fact that in the end the equipment was broken before the end of the various gates that Thierry had to maintain. He had several proposals for lodging and living conditions. Obviously, they are solid buildings over there. It was not a tent. That was a lot more comfortable than Bouvet, for example, or that several people around here have known over the years on their expeditions. Being on such an island, it's very nice to have a real building to be in, with not air conditioning, but heating and every nice living conditions. So the REF was in close contact with us. Lucien Fox 1 Tango Echo, who used to be president of the REF, helped us build a QO100 station with a dish that was dismantleable, so it could fit in the suitcase. And originally we were planning to have this permanent link to transmit the logs, and so we could talk with Thierry easily without being bothered by propagation or QRMers or people that really wanted a QSO and would have interrupted. So that was very important to that respect. Jean-Louis F5 Delta Juliet Lima, also an ex-president of the REF, was in charge of the negotiations with the ministries involved and the institutions like the TAF. Pascal F8TRT was in charge of creating the website hosted by the REF website. So he created it and was in charge of updating it every time we received either pictures or small articles from Thierry. So the original proposal, after the permission was granted, so to speak, was for a departure in December 2022. And that was given, I mean, in October, we knew that he was able to go in December. And the permission was saying that he would stay for 3 months, but with a lot of restrictions. The main one being restrictions on antennas and restrictions on operating times. Saying that because of geomagnetic measures being taken on the island, the rule was that there has to be no broadcast 2 hours before, 1 hour during, and 2 hours after the measure. Now, before, that can be understandable. During, obvious. After, why? We've asked several explanations. We never got any explanation. You just can't transmit 2 hours after. Supposedly, these measures were taken on the same time every day. I started my sentence with supposedly. Basically, very often, Thierry was not transmitting because they were supposed to take the measure at, let's say, 10 o'clock local time. So from 8 o'clock, he would stop transmitting. And then, about 11 o'clock, somebody came to see him and say, well, we didn't take the measure, we'll take it this afternoon. So not only did he lose 3 hours in the morning, but he lost 5 hours in the afternoon. So, and he had to cope with that all the time. So preparations, Twitter account to keep people informed. That was some of my job. That's not difficult to create a Twitter account. We created an association for that purpose to collect funds because we did collect quite a number of funds, and it was better to have it under an association to avoid any problem with the tax administration. We created a logo as well. Originally, it was difficult because we didn't want to let people know what the call sign would be to avoid pirates. So we just wrote FT/W on the original logo and only changed it with FT8WW once it started operating. We decided on the QSL policy. I know a little bit about that. So I am the manager. About 5,000 envelopes have already been shipped. I think it's probably the first time that on a de-expedition, QSL cards are sent before the expedition is over. So that was quite a bit of job. And cards were sent out of Germany because it cost quite a bit less than shipping them from France. I ran out of cards. I received 2,000 more cards for more QS Direct that I will need to answer as soon as I get back home. LOTW is uploaded as soon as we receive a direct request on Club Log when it works, but I mean when I'm able to do it. And Bureau cards will be answered, and the entire log will be uploaded to LOTW probably next month. Many QSOs were uploaded by mistake. Something went wrong with Club Log and all the some of the possibilities that Club Log offers. I'm not saying it was Club Log mistake. It probably was my mistake, but never mind. I think many people still apply for the direct card, and we're happy to make them happy. And then we had to start contacting sponsors, clubs and companies, not only DX clubs, but manufacturers of equipment. Just to name one example, we contacted Elecraft because Thierry wanted to use some K3s. Because of the fact that the expedition was happening at the same time as Bouvet, Elecraft gave preference to Bouvet. So they didn't want to sponsor us. So Thierry was quite happy with TS 590s, which is what he used. He had one himself. He bought 2 other ones, and that's what he used on the island. ACOM sponsored him as well with better prices on the equipment. So after Thierry left, he went to he went to Tromelin first. That was unexpected. He landed, but obviously couldn't operate at all. His equipment was already on board the boat, but couldn't land the equipment. So in the meantime, the entire world, including penguins, were waiting for the start of the activity. Can't really see very well here, but this is the budget. I won't go into details, but basically that was about 40,000 euros. Of course, there were extras and so forth, but the rough original budget was about 40,000 euros. Just the passage on the Marion Dufresne was invoiced to him 9,000 euros. And he has to pay fees, daily fees, while on the island for food and lodging, and like a hotel. So, as I said, the original idea was K3s, but that did not happen. He had two ACOM 1010, multiple dipole, fan dipole type, a delta loop for 30 and 40, 300 meters of coax, 500 meters of mass-trunk wire, matchbox that were offered by MFJ, reinforced electrical cable to manufacture dipoles supplied by F2DX, wire for beverage on ground, which were never installed. Even for the antennas he was using, he was not allowed to use radials. Two PCs, one for the main station, one for QO100. And of course, that said keys, power supplies, everything in Atlas duplicate, because the first repair shop was not so close. So he had to make sure everything was working. QO100 station, entirely built by Lucien F1TE, Jacques F6BKI, and Michel F5OZF, all of them in the Bordeaux area. The main thing was the dismantleable dish, because it had to fit in the suitcase that was going to be shipped to Crozet from Marseille first, Marseille Réunion, and then on the boat on the same voyage that Thierry was on. This is the coverage of QO100 for those of you who are not familiar with it. But there are not many DXs on QO100. The estimate is around 1,000, maybe 1,200. He probably worked them all. So that's the only band he worked them all on. So that was the building he was on. This is the base. This is the entire base. As I said earlier, there are 34 people on the island at that time. That varies a little bit from period to period. But that's where Thierry was. This is here, should I say, the house of the base man in charge. And all around are scientific buildings and lodging and generator and anything you can think of for such a base. So the elevation for QO100 from there was 31 degrees, so that there was no obstacle. The azimuth was 326 degrees. And I mean, in geographic azimuth, the magnetic azimuth was 378. So that was the setup for QO100. I won't go really into details. If somebody wants more detailed information, please approach me afterwards. The team, so Thierry on the top left, is 66 years of age. I was next. Then is Pascal F8TRT, then F5 Delta Japan Lima, Fox 1 Tango Echo, F6BKI, F5OZF, and F6AJA, who was also relaying information. The problem with F6AJA's bulletin was that the bulletin was edited every 2 weeks. So that was not necessarily enough to give information, should I say, live. So that's why we used either clusters or the Twitter account. Problem on the cluster is sometimes I was passing information on when Thierry would start operating, but my call sign was pirated as well. So that was real bad. Some of the pirating happened from DX Summit. So I contacted the man in charge, and they said the only thing we can offer you is to prevent F6EXV to spot anything on DX Summit. So I accepted that, no problem, because I had other means to pass information. Oops, what's that? Back up. Did I do something wrong here? No, no, no. Oh. Fair enough, no problem. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, thanks. Uh, so that was basically the team. So Thierry was in charge of relationship with the TAF, equipment selection, press articles. I was the finance minister, contact with sponsors and clubs, QSL manager, Pascal the webmaster, 5DJL relationship with the TAF and the institution, QO100, F20, F6BKI, 5OZF, and info on Les Nouvelles DX by Jean-Michel. So sometimes there was a little bit of QRM even on internet. The lines were fairly busy. So the Marion Dufresne is a big ship, and it burned, or at least part of it burned 3 years ago, but it was repaired, and now keeps on supplying all these islands on a regular basis. Thierry is CC. Some people don't care because they're already there. So after, as I said earlier, passing by Tromelin unexpectedly, that only delayed the arrival on Crozet by 1 day. And Crozet was the first stop of the Marion Dufresne on his tour to the Taff Islands. So that is the base. As you see, it's not big at all with details, but I guess it doesn't really matter. And it was already expected because they had people ready to help him install the mast, whether for the antennas or for the QO100. And they prepared the ground. Now Crozet is a volcanic island, so the ground is not so good for a ground, for antennas. And even to drill a hole in the ground, they had to get permission. That's how crazy it is sometimes. He was not supposed to take stones or there is no beach, so forget about holiday style operation. And the weather is not too good. So that was the only mast he was allowed to put on, about 8 meters tall. And here we can see the mast with the G5RV antenna. Every time he wanted to change band, every time, but depending on the bands covered by the antenna, he had to go out, take the antenna down, and put the other one antenna up again. Obviously, that was only possible if the weather was allowing it. And that is the QO100 station. It doesn't need to be high. That's the nice thing about satellite operation. And that was the operating position. A little bit better than Bouvet. So that was a room just for himself. He was sleeping nearby, and he was quite happy with the shack. In the proposals that he had, there were some that were absolutely crazy, like on how can I explain it? In in a very little place that was about 2 square meters, with a strange stairs to climb to, and absolutely crazy. But eventually they came up with that. They were sorry to say that there was no natural light. He said, I don't care. So he studied the radio operation, and of course those who do FT8 know the expression, the waterfall. For him it was a waterfall. You see, should I say, his pile-up is just really a full line. On some occasions he would decode over 140 stations on one period. So that was quite something. And it's a lottery. You know, you may be the strongest signal on the waterfall. That doesn't mean you're going to be worked. So yeah, the first QSOs were made on 30 meters on FT8. And this is the program he used to do Q100 QSOs. He was also doing video when he had skates with the schools. Now, I don't know if this is going to work. We'll give it a try. You may have heard that there was a QSO that I could organize between Bouvet and Crozet. That's what I call the QSO of the century, because a number 2 most wanted working a number 3 most wanted is something that I don't think has happened before and probably will never happen in the future. So I was in touch with the Bouvet guys by email, and I was in touch with Thierry by WhatsApp. Every time Thierry was on FT8, we would chit-chat on WhatsApp. I would say, hey, I see this guy calling you, look for him in the pile-up. I would say, when are you going to go on the other band? Anyway, we could chit-chat very easily, very, very easily. Of course, when he was doing CW or SSB, he would watch his computer screen, and that was impossible for me to pass any message. I couldn't say, okay, this friend needs to work, you will listen for him, I don't know, 20 up. That was not possible. So it had to be arranged ahead of time. Don't repeat it, because if he ever goes back somewhere in the area, don't call me to get skids. So I don't know if this is going to work. It was filmed on both sides, and the video shows the reception side. So let's give it a try. I don't know if it's going to work. No, it doesn't. Yeah, well, we'll get it off the website at the end of the presentation. I don't know. So that was on February the 11th. Actually, the skid happened during a time that Thierry was not supposed to transmit. But hell with the regulations for such a QSO. I can't really see well here, but total of QSOs was close to 52,000. Keep in mind it was a one-man operation with many restrictions. Again, for those who want these statistics, they can find them on Club Log. They are here, and the GM QSOs, the 35 uniques. Total QSO 113. 30 meters FT8, 13 QSOs, 20 FT8, 18 QSOs, 20 CW, 6 QSOs. That's only with GMs. 15 FT8, 22 QSOs, 15 CW, 2, 12 FT8, 15, 12 CW, 2, 10 FT8, 13 QSOs, 10 CW, 3, and 10 SSB, 4. The number 1 QSOer with Crozet is GM3YTS. How strange, how strange, how strange. With 11 QSOs. Number 2 was GM3POI. 10 QSOs. Number 3, equal MM0 EAX and MM0 SAI. Then Gavin with 7 QSOs. 6 QSOs by GM0AXY, MM0, is it JTV or ITV? JTV, MM0SJH. 5 QSOs GM3WOJ and GM7TUD. 4 QSOs GM4FDM and MM0GOR. 3 QSOs GM3UCH, MM0GPZ, MM5DWW, MM7CFC, and 2 QSOs GM0NAI, GM0OPS, and GM5CX. And a number of stations made just 1 QSO. I don't know if that covers the majority of the DXs of the GMDX group. Hopefully it does. And 2 QSOs on QO100 with Scotland, SCA and SAJ. Congratulations to both of them. I don't know if they are here. Okay, there's one. So many sponsors. Of course, the major sponsor was the Northern Cal. Commercial sponsors, Begali. It's written Bagali, but it's Begali for the CW keyers. Heil, VQ-Log, Rig Expert, Spiderbeam, the QSL printer, DX Engineering, Messi and Paoloni for coax, Passion Radio. Oops. Many sponsors. I won't go into details with the various clubs that sponsored. When the expedition was already finished, I was contacted by a club in Wisconsin, I think it was, who said, well, we haven't been contacted. We haven't so far sent you any help. We're very happy with the expedition. We want to sponsor you. So again, I won't go into details. In any big club that you can think of has been sponsoring one way or the other. So that's a lot of clubs. And last but not least, the GMDX group. So Thierry and myself and the rest of the gang say thank you very much for your support and for having me here today to show you some ideas, or have you show some ideas of what Crozet looks like for an expedition.
Okay, thanks very much, Paul. And while Malcolm tries to find that QSO on the internet, do we have any questions first?
Hi, John, G4IRN. Thanks very much for the talk. That was very, very interesting. Now that you've built up these excellent relationships with TAF, and
where does he go next?
presumably Thierry left the island on good terms and has a good reputation there. You know the question.
Yes. Well, there are 2 parts. Thierry's reputation and the other part of future operations. Thierry was very well integrated with the group on the island. He had very good relationship with everybody, and that was very important. He cared about that, thinking about possible future activities. In terms of future activities, the problem is a little bit more complex in a way that I haven't mentioned the Paul-Émile Victor Institute, who is in charge of doing these geomagnetic measures. I will call it the IPEV, Institute Paul-Émile Victor. The IPEV and the TAF are like this. They're fighting. There's poor relationship between them, and the radio amateur community is trapped in between. On the boat, Thierry was able to talk to some of the people in charge, not necessarily the final decision makers, and of course he asked the question, It's not really a secret, but don't publish it, so to speak. Yeah, I can say it, but don't publish it. We'll publish it in time. His idea is to go to Kerguelen, possibly not alone, but only with one more operator. He believes that any volunteer, you need a French passport to go. It's not as easy as it may sound after what happened. Again, for himself, everything went well. But the fight between the IPEV and the TAF is still very strong. And should I say, the radio amateurs are the victims of this fighting situation. He doesn't know what will happen. The last he told me was that probably not next year. The idea was to repeat the same thing from December to March next year. He is kind of pessimistic about that. Maybe the year after. And that's not even sure.
Okay, thanks. And
otherwise, maybe, but that's a different situation, he's thinking of Glorioso. But then the military get involved, so it's not as easy either.
let's go back to the QSO of the century, and see if this will work. Malcolm?
Go ahead. Oh, do I need to? No, you can do it from
No,
there.
you can do it.
Oh.
Dog?
Oh, it doesn't change. The film that is supposed to be part of the presentation has the filming on both sides at the receiving time. Unfortunately, it doesn't go through. I don't know why. But you should have seen LA7 GIA when he was receiving FT8WW signal. He jumped like crazy in the tent. So that was on 15 meters, I think 21,040 something. I forgot the exact frequency, but. The QS. I'll talk to the manager.
Any last questions? Yes, Gordon?
Really?
Hi, Paul.
Hi.
Was there any, after all the deliberations about you causing interference with magnetic measurements, was there ever any evidence that you did cause any problems, and is that likely to be an issue in future?
We asked the question, we didn't get any answer. I invite you to ask the question also. No. To be serious. After the 3 weeks, the original 3 weeks, we were asked to send copies of the logs. So we sent a native file. 2 weeks later, when the permission was not renewed yet, we received, or Thierry received a message saying, how do we deal with that? They didn't know how to read a native file, obviously. But it took them 2 weeks. to ask the question. Then we asked them what kind of format they wanted it on, and we did what they wanted. And 1 week later, after several phone calls, I made a phone call to the TAF saying, hey, you guys are kind of slow in making the decision, and can we have information, scientific evidence that is causing interference? We never ever got a reply. That would be the logical conclusion, and but again, we don't know. But if there was scientific evidence, why wouldn't they supply it? But this is the French administration. Their brains is made a different way. So
Very good. Well, thank you, Paul, for a preview or a first presentation about this very interesting expedition.